What happens when you're pushed to the very edge of human endurance, when you're left alone against the wild, with no tools, no help, and no way out? This is not fiction. These are real stories of survival against all odds. From the endless sands of the Sahara, to the lonely winds of a forgotten island, to the heartless waves of the Pacific, 3 souls fought their way back from the brink. This is a journey into the raw, unfiltered resilience of the human spirit. Alone, stranded, and exposed to the brutal forces of nature, what would you do if survival was your only option and everything else was gone? Today, we delve into 3 astounding real-life tales of human resilience. These are the survival accounts of Emil Laray, who crafted his escape from the vast Sahara Desert; Juana Maria, who spent almost 20 years in total isolation on a remote island; and José Salvador Alvarenga, who floated across the Pacific Ocean for more than a year. Each of these individuals endured solitude, unforgiving environments, and their own mental battles. Get ready for a journey that uncovers the extraordinary strength of the human spirit. Our story begins in 1993 with Emil Laray, a Frenchman known for his daring nature and skill as an electrical engineer. Thrill-seeking and courageous, Emil was always drawn to challenges that pushed his limits, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to face in the Moroccan Sahara. His plan was to traverse the desert in a modest yet dependable Citroën 2CV, a car chosen specifically for its straightforward design and rugged dependability, traits that would soon become vital. The Sahara is one of the harshest environments on the planet. Endless stretches of sand reach far beyond the horizon, and daytime temperatures soar past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite the tough conditions, Emil remained optimistic as he drove deeper into the arid wilderness, far from any sign of human life. But then, catastrophe struck. His vehicle struck a hidden rock buried beneath the sand, and with a sudden, violent impact, the suspension shattered. The car was beyond repair, leaving him utterly alone in the desolate expanse. In that moment, Emil grasped the severity of his situation. His choices were bleak. Walking out of the desert on foot with barely any food or water would almost certainly be fatal. He needed an alternative, and quickly. Refusing to surrender, Emil looked over the wreckage with a spark of inspiration. Drawing on his engineering expertise, he formulated a daring plan to convert the wrecked car into a crude motorcycle. It sounded nearly impossible, but it was his only shot at getting out alive. And so the transformation began. Over the following 12 days, Emil worked relentlessly. He dismantled the vehicle piece by piece, repurposing every usable component. Using the car's chassis as the foundation, he built a basic frame. Then he reinstalled the engine in a way that allowed it to power just one wheel. With bits of metal and a few rudimentary tools, he managed to construct a rough version of a motorcycle. It was far from perfect, but it worked. His efforts were grueling. By day, he endured scorching heat while rationing his limited food and water. By night, freezing temperatures tested his endurance as he fought to stay warm. He battled intense thirst and persistent hunger, aware that every passing moment drained his strength. Still, Emil kept going. He revised, improvised, and improved his design until, at last, he built something capable of motion. Nearly 2 weeks after being stranded, Emil's handmade desert motorcycle was finished. The ride was far from comfortable, but it was strong enough to carry him out of the desert. Emil climbed aboard, and with a final surge of determination, he fired up the engine and steered his creation across the brutal desert landscape. Against all odds, this resourceful desert engineer had pulled off the unimaginable, transforming a catastrophic mishap into a testament of human innovation. Emil Laray's daring escape from the Sahara stands as one of the most remarkable survival feats ever recorded, a shining example of how the instinct to survive can give rise to incredible acts of ingenuity. Our next tale is one of profound solitude and unwavering strength. In the early 19th century, a small Native American group called the Nicoleño inhabited San Nicolas Island, a remote, wind-battered patch of land located around 60 miles off California's coast. For countless generations, the Nicoleño people flourished there, but waves of violence and disease eventually devastated their community. By 1835, only a few survivors remained, and Spanish missionaries organized their relocation to the mainland. Among those prepared to leave was a young woman now remembered as Juana Maria. Fate, however, had other plans for her. In the confusion of the evacuation, Juana Maria was somehow left behind. Some believe she returned to search for a missing child or family member. Others think she may have simply failed to board the final boat. Regardless of the reason, she soon found herself utterly isolated on the abandoned island, watching helplessly as the ship vanished on the horizon. With no means of communication and no expectation of rescue, she was completely alone. The isolation was total. No one else remained, and there was no one to call for help. Juana Maria had to rely entirely on her own resourcefulness. She drew from her deep understanding of the land, catching fish, collecting roots and berries, and hunting seals and shellfish for food. She constructed shelters using whale bones and driftwood, crafted clothing from animal hides, and fashioned tools out of bones and stones. Her survival methods honored the ways of her ancestors, yet each day remained a test of will against crushing solitude. As the years went by, Juana Maria's presence on the island became the stuff of legend. On rare occasions, passing fishermen and traders reported columns of smoke rising from San Nicolas Island, evidence perhaps of the mysterious woman living alone. Yet these reports were infrequent, and no serious effort was made to find her. She continued to live in total seclusion, gradually becoming part of the harsh island environment. Most people would have succumbed to such loneliness, but Juana Maria endured. She adapted to her isolated life with extraordinary strength. Then in 1853, 18 long years after being left behind, Captain George Nadever and his crew came ashore on San Nicolas. To their astonishment, they encountered a woman who had survived alone for nearly 2 decades. Juana Maria welcomed them with laughter and hand gestures, though her language was no longer understood by anyone. Despite the language barrier, she appeared content and physically well. She was brought back to the mainland, where authorities made efforts to find someone who could interpret her speech. Tragically, by then, the Nicoleño people had either passed away or been absorbed into other communities, leaving Juana Maria as the last living member of her tribe, with no one left who could understand her words. As she tried to adjust to her new surroundings, her body, unaccustomed to foreign diseases, quickly succumbed to illness. Within weeks, she fell sick and passed away. Still, her legacy lives on. Remembered as the lone woman of San Nicolas Island, Juana Maria's life story remains an extraordinary example of human perseverance and survival in utter isolation. Our final account takes us to the wide, unforgiving waters of the Pacific Ocean in 2012, where a Salvadoran fisherman named José Salvador Alvarenga began a nightmare journey of endurance. A veteran of the sea, Alvarenga was no stranger to the demands of deep-sea fishing. However, nothing in his experience could have prepared him for what was about to unfold. Alongside a young fisherman named Ezequiel Cordoba, Alvarenga set out from Mexico's coast for a routine 2-day fishing expedition. But nature had other plans. Within hours, a fierce storm descended, destroying their radio and disabling the boat's engine. The storm hurled them hundreds of miles from their intended course, and as time dragged on, it became clear they were hopelessly lost at sea. Days slipped into weeks, and the gravity of their situation sank in. With no way to communicate and no one coming to find them, they were completely stranded in the vast Pacific. At first, the 2 men remained hopeful. They carefully rationed the small amount of food they had brought and prayed for rain to provide drinking water. When rainwater was unavailable, they resorted to extreme survival tactics, drinking turtle blood and even their own urine to fend off dehydration. For food, they managed to catch fish and seabirds, consuming them raw to conserve energy. But as time went on and weeks blurred into one another, the never-ending stretch of ocean began to wear them down. The Pacific. The ocean was not only immense, it was merciless. Powerful waves pounded their fragile boat, salt water burned their skin, and the scorching sun constantly threatened to drain their will to go on. As the weeks of drifting wore on, Cordoba's health and hope steadily declined. The extreme physical and emotional strain took a heavy toll on the young man, and he gradually began to give up his fight for life. Alvarenga did everything he could to lift Cordoba's spirits, but after roughly 4 weeks adrift, Cordoba succumbed to the ordeal and passed away. The death of his companion was a crushing blow for Alvarenga. Grief, guilt, and overwhelming solitude consumed him, especially since he had made a promise to return Cordoba's body to his family. But the merciless sea offered him a heart-wrenching ultimatum. To keep surviving, he had no choice but to release Cordoba's body to the ocean. Now entirely alone, Alvarenga faced the crushing weight of isolation. With no one left to speak to, he began to create imaginary companions, engaging in conversations with the late Cordoba, inventing fictional friends, and even speaking aloud to the sea itself. Each day was a grueling test of both mental and physical endurance. His body, weakened by starvation, struggled to function. The punishing sun and the salty spray left his skin raw and blistered. Every morning he awoke unsure if he'd have the strength to survive another day, but he continued to fight. For nourishment, he kept catching sea turtles, fish, and seabirds, consuming them raw and drinking their blood when clean water was unavailable, just to stay alive. As the months dragged on, he was caught in a torturous cycle of sheer survival. Alvarenga weathered terrifying storms that threatened to overturn his small boat, gripping onto it through howling winds and towering waves. By day, he suffered under a blistering sun, and by night he endured bone-deep cold. At times, he hallucinated, believing he saw land only to watch it vanish as he approached, challenging the limits of his sanity. Days blurred into months as he drifted westward, carried across thousands of miles by strong ocean currents. Despite the endless blue around him and the absence of land, something inside him refused to give up. He later shared how he stayed alive by imagining the taste of his favorite meals, thinking of family celebrations, and envisioning the streets of his hometown. In his darkest moments, those mental images were his anchor, his connection to hope. By the end of a full year at sea, Alvarenga was nearly unrecognizable. Emaciated with tangled hair and an unkempt beard, he looked like a castaway from another world. His clothes had long since worn away, leaving him exposed to the brutal sun, salt, and wind. His body was beaten down, but his spirit had not been broken. Through his unthinkable ordeal, he somehow kept a flicker of hope alive. Then on January 30th, 2014, 438 days after he had set sail for what was meant to be a quick fishing trip, Alvarenga spotted something unbelievable on the horizon: land. Starving, weak, and mentally drained, he paddled with the last remnants of his strength, desperate to reach it. When he finally stumbled onto the shores of a remote island in the Marshall Islands, he had survived more than a year at sea, drifting over 6,000 miles. The local islanders were astonished when they found him. He looked like a ghost of a man, skeletal and sunburned, yet he was alive. They gave him water, food, and the care he so desperately needed. Within hours, word of his miraculous survival spread across the globe, as people struggled to grasp how he had managed to live through such a nightmare. Alvarenga was taken to a hospital where his slow recovery began. His journey had been one of sheer endurance, inner strength, and unimaginable mental resilience. He had spent 438 days lost at sea, surviving what seemed impossible. Scientists and survival experts were stunned by his story. Some even questioned its authenticity. But Alvarenga's battered body carried undeniable evidence of the suffering he had endured. To this day, he holds the record for the longest known solo survival at sea. José Salvador Alvarenga's story remains a profound reminder of the enduring power of the human will. Against all odds, he held on, driven by a sliver of hope that even the vast and merciless Pacific Ocean could not extinguish. These three incredible survival stories remind us that endurance is not solely about strength or expertise. It's about an unshakable determination to keep living. Emil Laray's inventive escape, Juana Maria's quiet resilience in isolation, and José Salvador Alvarenga's perseverance in the face of hopelessness all illuminate the extraordinary force of the human spirit. Each one faced overwhelming odds in a harsh and indifferent world, yet each one endured.